Okay, greetings everyone. Sorry we're running a little behind, but glad you are here to join us. And we're about ready to start, so we'll talk to God as we get underway. Father, thanks for this opportunity to be together to go through questions that have arisen in the minds of some of your family members, and that you get a chance to explore these things and hopefully provide some clarity. So we pray for good communication, clarity, and for understanding, but more importantly, that the discussion will help further our relationships with you in such a way that we can more clearly demonstrate who you are through the way in which we live, because of Yeshua. Amen.
Okay, we're off. No, I'm going. All right. Then, why are we off?
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, then.
Yeah, you need
Okay.
it. All right.
All right, good.
I'll have the letters behind my head.
Yes, sure.
No, it's all right. We'll just be off center like we
Yeah.
normally are.
So, and we got that wonderful shot of the trash can in the background.
Yeah. Well, at least it's not overflowing or anything.
Well, tell you what,
It's pretty good.
just for the sake of beauty, let me
And
get it.
somebody erased that cute picture that our grandson drew on the blackboard.
I did, yeah.
Oh.
I left it up for my class and then I erased it.
Oh. I won't tell him.
I didn't
was
even think about leaving it up for tonight.
I won't tell him it was you.
Okay. I'm turning to a passage or passages I'm going to need to
That
look
you have
at.
memorized?
No.
Well, don't you have the genealogies memorized?
No, I don't.
No? Oh, okay. Mainly memorized. No?
All right. The question, this is a question from Friday the 13th, so hopefully it's a lucky question.
Boy, you're just jumping right off and not saying hello or anything.
No, I thought I did say hello to everybody.
It was so memorable, I didn't.
Yeah. Okay. Then let me say hello to everybody again.
Hello, everyone.
It's good to have you with us, whether you're with us in real time or join us later.
In your heart.
Okay, and it looks to me like we've got a bit of lag time.
A little bit. Don't look at it.
So if hopefully that will not, you will not, pardon me. Hopefully you will not find that too
It says
distracting.
network connection issues is what it said.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it popped up.
All right. Do we need to hold on, Jessica, while you play with that, or just go ahead?
I would just go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
Try this again as I'm trying to clear my throat. All right. The question that came in on Friday the 13th is, why is the genealogy of Jesus different between Matthew and Luke? And then why is Mary only listed in one genealogy and the only female listed in any genealogy? Okay.
That last thing is not correct.
Well, you want to?
No. Please.
No.
Don't you teach this like every?
Do you want to say anything about it before I get into it?
No, go get into.
Okay. Well, first of all, the two genealogies, the one is in the beginning of Matthew chapter 1, so if you're looking at that, and the other is in Luke 3, and I'll tell you exactly where in Luke 3 it is found when I page there. All right. Luke 3, beginning at verse 23. So it's the end of Luke 3 and the beginning of Matthew 1. Okay. Why are the genealogies different between the two? Well, you get some hint at what's going on when you look at the genealogies themselves. verse verse 16 of Matthew 1. It's towards the end of the line. And Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Yeshua, who is called the Messiah. Okay, so if you if you read it carefully, you will find that this is the genealogy of Yeshua that goes through Joseph, who is the husband of Mary, and the wording is very precise. You don't have the father of, the father of, the father of, and then Jacob, the father of Joseph. You don't then have it say the father of Yeshua. You have it instead this striking and I'll just leave it at that. The striking insertion. He's the husband of Mary. As you notice, the genealogy, as so often happens, it goes through the fathers. You got the father of, you got the father of, you got the father of, as you go running through this genealogy, and then it's almost as if it's a startling. I'm not sure that's the best term. An unexpected insertion that Joseph was the husband of Mary, but is not the father of Yeshua, because it says of Mary, of whom was born Yeshua, who's called the Messiah. So, quite clearly, if you read the text carefully, this is the genealogy of Yeshua's father, Joseph. It is not the genealogy of Yeshua's mother, Mary. And as you trace this particular genealogy back, it goes all the way back to verse 1, strikingly, a record of the genealogy of Yeshua the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Why son of David? Well, because son of David was the most common messianic title of that time period. So not only was he the son of David as far as his genealogy is concerned, there's an emphasis then that what you have here relates to Yeshua's messianic credentials. And then, of course, he needs to be the son of Abraham. Both themes are followed throughout the Gospel of Matthew in some way. But then when you get to the end of it, you have the statement that it is from Mary that Yeshua is born. Raising the question, if this is not the genealogy of Mary, and if this is the genealogy of Joseph, and Yeshua is not born of Joseph but born of Mary, of what use is this genealogy? And that's a good question. And the answer to that question is
quite a bit.
Yes, quite a bit. Because as we learn through the text, in effect, Joseph formally adopts Yeshua or declares him to be his own son. Okay? So, and in those days, and I don't recall the Talmudic passages offhand, but you have a couple passages in the Talmud that describe that if a father simply declared someone to be his son, that was sufficient to formally adopt that child as his son. And in effect, Joseph does exactly that at the end of Matthew chapter 1. After he has that dream of the angel, or an angel comes to him in the dream. Quick aside here. Joseph has a dream. Does that sound at all familiar to anybody? And that too is intentional. And that is also picked up in this gospel. And for much more on that, and I thank you, Andre, for raising the question so I could use this as a commercial. For much more on that, hop in on us in the course that I'm teaching, Gospels in the Jewish Context. But anyhow, all that to be said is he took Mary to be his wife. In other words, he formalized the engagement and made the marriage official, and then he made the adoption official because he gave Yeshua, the baby, the name Yeshua. So formalizing the adoption. That means that all the inheritance rights that were coming down through Joseph, that were tied back to David, are now officially Yeshua's, even though technically, well, how should we put it? Biologically, Joseph was not the father of Yeshua. He was simply legally the father of Yeshua. Therefore, Yeshua inherits all his rights. Now, it's in this genealogy, before we look and compare with the genealogy that's mentioned in Luke, it's in this genealogy that the question that was raised is now corrected. Because Mary is not the only female that's mentioned in the genealogy.
There are several notable women. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I don't have a copy of it in front of me, so then
Okay.
you go ahead.
All right, here we go.
Well, after you're done.
Verse 3. You have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah and his brothers, and then Judah, which was the royal line, father of Perez. By the way, quick aside here, in the as part of our liturgy, virtually each Shabbat, we sing Lecha Dodi. One of the verses in Lecha Dodi refers to the son of Perez. Why should he refer to the son of Perez? Because this is yet another messianic, roughly speaking, title. So in Lecha Dodi we have a reference to the one to come who's called the son of Perez. Here he is listed in this genealogy as the son of Perez. But it doesn't stop there. Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. So right at the very beginning of the genealogy, as well as at the end of the genealogy, you have this person by the name of Tamar. And strikingly, I have sitting next to me a woman with the Hebrew name Tamar.
Yes.
All right. Zipping on through, 2 verses later, you've got Salmon, spelled like salmon, but that's not the same. Salmon, the father of Boaz. We know that name. Yes, from the book of Ruth. The father of Boaz, whose mother was, ready? Rahab. We know of Rahab as well, don't we? Another striking woman. By the way, one of the reasons Tamar is striking is she helped preserve this line coming from Judah.
But she wasn't violent. She was just a very interesting person.
Yeah. And now we have another important character from Jewish history, Rahab. Were it not for Rahab, 2 spies in Jericho might have ended up dead, and who knows what would have happened thereafter. So Rahab. And then it says, Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. So, within the first handful of verses, you have Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth. All mentioned because they are important women, among the very important women that are part of Jewish history. So, it is not that surprising then that you have Mary, and she is in effect then called the mother of Yeshua, of whom was born Yeshua. Okay? Now, that brings me to Luke. In Luke, you start not with the oldest ancestor that you're listing, but the exact reverse. The whole thing is flipped. You start with the birth of Yeshua, and you go back to back through the genealogy, all the way up to You got Noah, you got Lamech, and I'm now in verses 36 and 37. Then you get Methuselah, then you get Enoch, and all the way back to the son of Seth, I love that, the son of Adam, the son of God. So the emphasis here in driving this genealogy all the way back to Adam and to God himself also lays some of the framework and some of the themes that you find in the book of Luke. But that's not the part we're interested in for this question. It's just to give you the context. Now Yeshua, I'm in verse 23, himself was about 30 years old when he began his ministry. So what? Well, that's when priests began their ministry. He was, now listen carefully, he was the son, so it was thought, of Joseph. So he's not the son of Joseph. This genealogy also makes it explicit that Joseph was not his natural father. And then the text goes on to say the son of Heli, the son of Matat, the son of Levi. There's another Levi in there, the son of Melchi, and so forth. It seems fairly straightforward that it appears that you've got another genealogy of Joseph. Well, that's only appearance. The text quite literally and structurally says this: who was the son of Yeshua, he was the son of, it was thought of Joseph. In effect, it then goes on to say, in parens, so to speak, but was the son of Heli, the son of Matat, the son of Levi, the son of Melchi. Am I putting too much into this? Well, no, not if you read the text. The text quite literally says, you won't find it in English, you'll find it in the Greek. Yeshua was the son, so it was thought of Joseph, and then the text says, the son of the Heli, or Eli, the son of the Matat, the son of the Levi, the son of the Melchi. Catch that? There is no article in front of Joseph, but there's an article in front of those who preceded Joseph. It's another way in which Joseph is distinguished from the genealogy, and thereby indicating to us that this is not Joseph's genealogy, in which case, whose genealogy is it? It's Mary's genealogy. Okay? Now, this particular genealogy does not list any women, so it's not particularly surprising that Mary is not mentioned here. That phrase, so it was thought, has some legal connotations to it. That's the term I was looking for. Implying that Yeshua was the son legally, or as it was thought, or as it was processed, so to speak, of Joseph, but was in fact the son of Heli. Fair enough? And this genealogy is then different because it goes through a different line. It does end up in David's line, but it does, let's find David here quickly. David. Here, the son of David that's mentioned is not Solomon, as it is in Matthew's genealogy, but Nathan, another son of David. So you can see both these lines go back to David, but one of them goes through Nathan, one of them goes through Solomon. What's going on? Why are we doing this? Well,
contradictions in the Bible. Oh, no.
Well, obviously not contradictions, because the rest of the genealogy is different. It's what so often when you assume contradictions or allege contradictions, what you find here is not contradiction, but complementariness.
I don't think that's a real word, but we know what it means, so you can use it.
Okay. I was going to make it complementation, but that didn't.
No.
That sounded even worse.
Yeah.
So the two complement each other. The two do not contradict each other. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, in Second Chronicles, I don't know the exact reference. There is a reference to exactly how does that go? No, let me leave it unless I can remember exactly what that reference is.
Do you want me to go get a Bible?
I don't remember. You go right ahead and get a Bible, but I don't.
Second Chronicles is a long
It's
book.
a long book, so I'll have to think through exactly how that is.
Well, tell them what it says.
In that text in Second Chronicles, and there David's sons are listed, and I'm going to guess now that I'm thinking of it, Solomon is not the first son mentioned. In that listing, Nathan is the first son mentioned, as if the chronicler, who in all likelihood was Ezra, as if the chronicler felt that in some way there was an additional importance added to Nathan. And in this sense, in this genealogy, that importance is now highlighted, because the actual genealogy of Yeshua, his natural genealogy as opposed to his legal genealogy goes through Nathan. But Nathan was a son of David. His legal genealogy goes through Solomon. Solomon was a son of David. The legal rights come through Solomon, and so through Joseph, the father, we'll call him the adopted father of Yeshua. The natural line goes also through David, and therefore ends with Mary, but goes back through David to another son of David by the name of Nathan, who for some reason is mentioned before Solomon in Second Chronicles. If I'm remembering it, Second Chronicles rather than First Chronicles. Does that make sense? Now, what was it? There was something else I was going to say along that line before this next thing. Son of David. Oh, yes, son of David, son of David. Interestingly enough, the rabbis of that day and later expected the Messiah to be not only son of David, but doubly the son of David. In other words, the son of David on both sides of his genealogy. All right, this fulfills that expectation. In a couple of the courses, and Barbara, you may remember which ones because you've been in them now. I think both in Jewish Roots and Foundations of Scripture 1 and in Messianic Apologetics, we talk about the genealogy in much more detail because there is further significance to this genealogy and what I've now sketched out for you. So, for more on that, you'll have to get in those classes, and I can't go into all that with you because you would need the chart that I hand out in those classes in order to make any more sense of it than what I've already confused you with. So, twofold over, as the rabbis expected, the genealogies show that Yeshua is, in fact, the expected son of David or the Messiah. Through his natural mother, Mary, and then through his legally adopted father, who had the legal rights to the throne because he goes directly to Solomon. One further footnote at this point. And then an aside. If you compare the genealogies all the way back through, oh, and by the way, I should say this about genealogies. If you compare these genealogies with the genealogies that you find in Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles, you'll find that not everybody's mentioned. In other words, just because two things are important here. That means that for some reason, these were mentioned because it was felt that these were the important people to mention. And secondly, those who are mentioned, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So you cannot assume that you've got all the names included here. And that's why some names are included in some genealogies, and when you compare them with another, they're not in the other genealogy. That's not a contradiction. It's just the way genealogies were done. Not everyone was named. And so if you were to stack back, going back to the book of Genesis, stack the names together one on top of another and how long they lived, you cannot come up with a direct chronology, because not everybody is named in the genealogy. So the genealogies do not give you the total number of years that took place between people in the genealogy. Fair enough? That's sort of an aside, but it's important in dealing with genealogies. Now, why does the first genealogy, Matthew, make an express notation that there were 14 generations between this and 14 generations between this, and then the third time and 14 generations between this and the birth of Yeshua? Well, right away that tells you that Matthew has structured the genealogy, or who's included in his genealogy, intentionally in groups of 14. There is some rabbinic understanding that these are the numbers that reflect the rise and the fall, and then ultimately the rise again of the dynasty of David. Matthew is in all likelihood building on that. And so he stresses that the genealogy goes back to, he's the son of David, who happened to be the son of Abraham. So, the genealogies were important to establish the royal line, but the genealogies were also important in those days to establish the priestly line. And you see this reference in Ezra and Nehemiah when the people come back from captivity. People can only qualify as priests if they have the correct genealogy as priests. So one gospel stresses Yeshua as king, the other gospel stresses Yeshua as priest, and again, that's a commercial for the course to come, the course that I'm presently teaching. That, I think, is more than enough about the genealogies. So, different genealogies, one from Mama, one from Papa, and the genealogies say that expressly if you read the text carefully. In case you are too quick to fault Luke for excluding or not including the women, don't, because as you go later through the gospel, this is a gospel that stresses the importance of women in Yeshua's life and ministry.
Luke likes women.
Luke likes women. Yeah.
Like David likes women.
Yes, like David likes women.
Please do not take that in a sexual
in the wrong way, yeah.
context. When I say David likes women, David thinks a lot of women, not often. He thinks highly of women.
Yes.
He has interchanges with women and has relationships with women. He appreciates them. Let me just say that. He appreciates them. And Luke also. Luke has the most quotes from Miriam of any gospel. And if you think you'd be correct, in Luke's presentation, he emphasizes in several places that he wanted to do a historical story about what happened, and you can see as you read that he writes things that only Miriam would know. So he must have interviewed her. He must have gotten the information directly from her, because we have information that only she would know, and she shared it with Luke. Otherwise, we would not have it either. And so in that sense, Luke also shows that he appreciates women, which I feel is good for Dr. Luke.
Okay, let me bounce on that twice.
Okay.
First, let me read the text that Patrice is referencing. It's the first paragraph of the Gospel of Luke. Many have undertaken to draw up and we looked at this text, by the way, 2 nights ago in the class Thursday night. Yes, that was another commercial. Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who were eyewitnesses. Therefore, I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning. In other words, he's telling us in this context that he checked these things out with the eyewitnesses, and he's checked them out with the accounts that were drawn up. In other words, he dealt with the first-hand oral and written material. And I did all this so, verse 4, that you might know with certainty the things that you've been taught, O Theophilus. So, if he's going to go to the eyewitnesses, who is the eyewitness to the birth of Yeshua? Joseph and Mary. And if Joseph were still around, he went to him. If Mary was certainly still around, he went to her. So this literally goes back to the beginning. Now, why the stress or the mention of the various important women in the genealogy in Matthew? Do you remember what Patrice just said? David was known as a person who valued women. And if this one being presented as the son of David, as for the Messiah, then the son of David should value women just as much as his great ancestor did. And
that was a should.
Yeah. And in fact, he did. And so that stress at the beginning of this gospel as well is just another indicator or connector in the thematic approach of Matthew to present us with Yeshua truly like his father or great ancestor David. So like father, like son in that broader and larger sense.
When I was looking at Chronicles, I happened to see this lengthy footnote. It's in a box on the page. This is from the Learning Bible. The Learning Bible is from the American Bible Society, and it's an NIV. But let me read you this note. All right, so this note is pretty good. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, and for many reasons, Christians, even scholarly Christians, often, not every time, but often feel the need to talk about, well, this isn't just for the Jewish people, this is for everybody in the world. And would you say that's a repeat? It's like they push the button on the computer and it just repeats it. I'm not sure why they feel that's something we need to read out of every single aspect of, especially Yeshua, and then Rav Shaul. But it's certainly done so much that you're wondering, and why would you need to say something like this? Oh, he's not for the Jewish people, he's for the whole world. And I'm just going, okay, why do you keep emphasizing this? Because people today, what? It just, makes no sense. All right, let me just read this to you because it sort of summarizes. Israel's future kings were to be descendants of King David. Both of the genealogies of Yeshua link him with David, although they differ in details in their lists. Matthew emphasizes Yeshua as the fulfillment of God's promises to Israel, so his list begins with Abraham, the father of God's people. Then his list moves through David, Israel's modern king. I don't care for that.
Can you be more explicit?
If they mean that David, every king after him should do what David did as a king, Maybe not. I don't think that's the important thing of David's kingship by any means, that he was perfect.
No.
That would disqualify him if he needed to be perfect. So this first, although they differ in details of the list, Matthew emphasizes Yeshua as the fulfillment of God's promises to Israel. He moves to Abraham. Then his list moves to David, Israel's king, and through leaders of the Jewish people when they return from exile, which is Matthew 1. The list in Luke goes backwards, beginning with Joseph's, Yeshua's legal father, through David the king, Jacob, Abraham, and all the way back to Adam, the first human. Okay, and here is the summary of what this person says. This line shows us that Yeshua was important not only for Israel, but for the whole human race. Is that my takeaway from those genealogies? Maybe the fifth takeaway, skipping the other four, which are probably more important, but it just is, it makes the genealogies somewhat shallow, or it leaves you with an impression that genealogies are shallow. And isn't that nice? Did you get a blessing out of it? I think in 21st century Western culture, genealogies have become more important with the advent of the DNA testing, which, here's my unanswered question is, okay, so if Miriam had the baby, what would Yeshua's DNA look like? We can discuss that another time. But ancestry has caused us to be more interested in our ancestors than was ever true before, because we didn't have the technology other than human reporting to say, and then your father came from, his family came from this country, and your mother's family came from that country, and well, how long have they been in America? All these things are more researchable now than they've ever been before. But in the past, it was important for you to be able to talk about your lineage and be able to prove your lineage. And I would also like to point out that in the temple, in the Fort Knox area under the Temple Mount,
Better define what you mean by Fort Knox.
Yeah, I will.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Of course I am. The gold of the nation and the valuable papers of the nation, or papyri, were in the temple. They were stored under the temple, and research was carried on in those important papers and papyri under the temple. And therefore, when the temple was taken over 2 times, it would, the first time by the Babylonians, it seems as though they just left it, the Fort Knox. The Babylonians may not have been hip to the idea that there was a valuable storehouse underneath, although they had been shown it by one of the kings. That's a sad, sad story that Isaiah tells us. But surely under the Romans, the valuables were taken out, and when it was burned, the papyri burned also. So we should thank these guys during biblical times that they wrote this down. Hello. That, which could be proven if you did research in the temple. If you wanted to know who you related to, or who your husband or wife to be was related to, that information would have been within the temple, underneath it, in the special storehouses. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
We should be grateful that we have what we have. So,
Yeah, this commentary got me to look back again.
oh, it's notes. It's
Note,
not really.
yeah. Well, or it's this note on the text got me to look back again at the Luke text. So let me read to you the Luke text. Now, the way it happened to work out in the way this particular edition of, and I'm reading from the NIV, this particular edition worked out At the top of my column, it says Luke 4:1, but it has the closing lines of Luke 3. So if you're starting at the top of my column, right here, the first things you read as you turn the page are the following: the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. And the very next thing you read is Yeshua, full of the Spirit of God, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit in the desert. Okay? The one bleeds into the other. And then as you continue, and there the devil said to him, if you are the Son of God. Do you see how Luke has set this up as he wrote? He concludes the genealogy by claiming that Yeshua is ultimately the Son of God. And then that very claim is questioned within 10 lines of the text by the devil himself. If you are the Son of God. So the claim is made through this genealogy, or hinted at least through this genealogy, and then it is tested immediately thereafter. So that is at least one reason why Luke takes his genealogy all the way back to God, but it sets the stage as well for the one who functions as the representative of all of humanity before God, just like the priest functioned in representing the Jewish people in front of God in the days of the priesthood. So again, builds on the upcoming themes of Luke dealing with his priesthood. But here, anyhow, I'll just leave it at that. I thought I was going to say something further about the David connection, but I've lost it. Okay. All right. Now what I want to do is what we normally do at the beginning, but we'll do it so as not to skip it, and that is to ask those of you who are actually present, first of all, if you've got any questions of what we covered, and then if you've just got any questions, because your questions should have priority. So we'll do that first with the people in the room, and then we'll do that with those who've joined this live stream.
With the crowds.
Adam and Eve, are they considered Jewish?
Adam and Eve, are they considered Jewish? Excellent question.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'm glad that popped into your mind. Adam and Eve, are they considered Jewish? When as Jews we pray to God, how do we usually address God? God of whom?
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay. Because it's through Abraham. Let me back it up just a tad. As Jews, we are considered the people of Abraham. But we're not the only people of Abraham, because Abraham had two sons. He had more than two sons, but two primary sons. He had Isaac and he had Ishmael. So there's a line that goes back to Abraham that goes through Ishmael, not just through Isaac. Let's also remember that Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. So the line that goes through, a line of Isaac goes through Jacob, is then considered the line of the Jewish people, hence Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But the people, the descendants of Esau, also were children of Abraham. So the Jewish people, as per the promise of God, and you can see this in Genesis, because the covenant that God made with Abraham is confirmed to Isaac. The covenant that God made with Abraham and therefore Isaac is then confirmed not once but twice to Jacob. So we know that the line that goes through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and therefore Jacob's kids, is then the line of the Jewish people. In that sense then, in the covenantal sense, because this relationship that we have with God is based on the covenants, is the covenant that God made with Abraham and Sarah that came through Isaac and Jacob. That's the Jewish people. So was Abraham the first Jew? Some people say yes. Some people say because it had to go through Isaac and Jacob as well. No, his descendants are the first Jews, but his descendants through Isaac. I would argue that technically, because the covenant promise was made with Abraham, yeah, he's the first Jew.
Except Muslims would say that he's the father of Islam.
Yes, exactly.
So you have to keep that in mind.
Exactly. That's the line through Ishmael and the line through Esau. You could say that Abraham and Sarah are the father and mother of Jews or Judaism, and that would be correct. But that means that, was Abraham born a Jew? No. He became a Jew.
Yeah.
All right. So that hence the overlap and confusion. Let me take now the question that sort of is somewhat related then to what you just raised. Why does Luke take us all the way back to Adam? Because in part, he is anticipating that ultimately this Jewish message will go out into all the world, which is what was anticipated by God and those in Judaism who studied and understood their role carefully, because down through the years we were known, Isaiah describes this a couple occasions, we were intended to be a light to the nations. Back in Genesis, Abraham, the promise to Abraham was that through him and his descendants, all nations, all peoples would be blessed. It's that aspect that Luke also includes, and you can see that he includes it because when he writes Luke the sequel, the book of Acts chapter 1, the message that he gives, and interestingly enough, I referenced this just last night in the Drash, the instruction that is given by Yeshua is for these people now to go to take the message to Jerusalem, to Judea, and then to the ends of the earth. So in that sense, it comes full circle. And the promises to Abraham are now being described quite literally as the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob now take the message that God had delivered through, the message of blessing that God delivered through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're now taking it all around the world. Okay, that was sort of a broader answer than what you're asking, but that was a very good question. Okay, any other questions from those of you who are here in, if you would call it, the classroom?
The virtual.
Okay, now for those who in the virtual classroom, any questions from you? No. All right. Then we come to another question that was...
yeah, oy vavoy.
This obviously came up from the questioner because of something that the questioner was reading or had encountered on the internet.
Or even before the internet, there were questions like this.
Yes.
I seem to remember them when I was in college.
Yeah, but the questioner sent us something from the internet. That's why I said from the internet.
Gotcha.
Internet. And that reminds me to issue the warning. We used to say, just because it's in print does not mean it is correct or factual. It's far more so the case. Just because you read it or saw it on the internet does not mean it's true. Okay?
Question everything.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the question. Is it possible that Lord Brahma, the creator god of Hinduism, is the pre-type of the God of Abraham? Please see the introduction to a discourse on the subject I have included. I'm very interested in your perspective if you have one on this. And since the person submitting the question included it, I thought that at least part of it I should read to you because that helps in the answer to this.
I don't think I ever saw this part. I saw the question, but I didn't see.
This came from...
Yeah, I know where
Okay.
it came from.
Yeah, okay. So here it is. A fascinating hypothesis, and right away to me that helps to describe this. Somewhat fascinating, and at best a hypothesis, developed in recent years, proposes a vision of the patriarch Abraham totally different from what eminent biblical studies have until today reported. Let me pause again. If it is totally different than what eminent biblical studies until today have reported, then that's another reason to question this. Here you go. In 1552, in other words, the eminent scholars from today had plenty of time to examine this, and they obviously have not bought into it. In 1552, the French linguist, astronomer,
And
Kabbalist,
Kabbalist.
Guillaume Postel was among the first to correlate Abraham with Brahma. I will add in all likelihood also one of the last until this was resurrected again. Continuing, deducing his hypothesis from the study of the Jewish Zohar. Okay, two major problems already. You are not supposed to even deal with the Zohar, according to Jewish tradition, until you've mastered the Torah, until you've mastered the Tanakh, the rest of the Older Testament, and in some Jewish traditions, until you've mastered the Talmud. The Talmud, on the bookshelf in my office, runs virtually the length of this table. Okay? Till you've mastered all that, now you're better equipped to deal with the Zohar or Kabbalah. The Zohar is, in fact, the main literary source of Kabbalah. Although reputedly the teachings of Simon Bar Yochai, 2nd century, the Kabbalah, or Kabbalah, whichever way you want to pronounce it, does not come into existence as such until, if I remember correctly, sometime around the 13th century. So guess what? That makes Kabbalah some 3,000 years after Abraham. So not exactly would they be current with the history or information. Then it goes on to say this description. In 1769, Immanuel Kant, similarly to what Voltaire wrote before him, compared Adam and Abraham with the Hindu Adimo and Brahma. I'm going to get back to that in a second and let you address that.
Several things I would like to
yes,
say.
I figured you would. In 1799, Joseph Priestley, in his text, A Comparison of the Institutions of Moses with those of the Hindus and other ancient nations, took up the claims of Voltaire and Kant by reproposing the possible derivation of Abraham from Brahma. Okay? All right. Do you want to?
Well, I was just going to say, we had a professor. Here's what he would say about things like this. That's not right. That's not even wrong. So, do you have anything to say?
No, I'm going to say more.
Okay.
But why did Kant and Voltaire, who were not exactly eminent biblical scholars, why did they connect Adam with Adimo? And
I don't even know
Abraham,
who Adimo is, and I studied Hinduism.
And Abraham with Brahma.
Because it sounds like it.
Exactly.
But they come from two different language sources, so they're not connected. The names are not connected at all.
Yeah.
Just because they have three letters in common.
In English.
In English.
Yeah. Is that what is called a linguistic fallacy?
It would definitely be a linguistic fallacy. I'm not exactly sure what type it is. I think you would classify it under the type, which I can't remember the rubric, but here's an example. So this is somewhat akin to God is today better called a dog because they're obviously so closely linked. God and dog that it's almost like They are the same thing. And so, in the sense that dogs show us the way and hear sounds that we cannot hear, and smell things that we cannot smell, in the same way God leads us into the unknown, because He know. See what a bunch of junk that is. See how that was? It was really easy for me to do.
I mean, after all, they got the same 3 letters.
Three, and they're just, and 3 represents God once again. And so, we have the secret, which is dogs are gods. Okay, yeah. So let's go back to this first first person, this person, I don't know who's writing this. I'm going to say Mr. All right. Guillaume Postel in the 1500s. Yeah, linguist. All right, he's called a French linguist in 1552. Okay, that probably means he knew a lot of languages and had studied a lot of languages. That doesn't make you a linguist, it makes you a polyglot.
That's not a nasty
Because
term.
it's not. Because linguistics as a science, if they want to get technical, is more like the end of the 1800s. All right, the end of the 1700s. And it was, by the way, a French guy who is credited with, through his writings and through his letters, dividing up the general study of languages and keying in on what we would call linguistics, but that was, a couple hundred years later. I don't remember the name. Postel. Guillaume is the French word for William, dear.
Oh, okay.
Guillaume. Among the first to correlate Abraham with Brahma because he got it out of the Zohar. Okay, that's assuming that the writers of the Zohar would be at all familiar with Hindu gods. Which if I had to put money down on this idea, that the rabbis who are writing the Zohar would definitely know about the existence of Brahma, the Eastern god, from thousands of miles away. I would bet all my money in the idea that they didn't. Immanuel Kant, now he is, didn't he write in German, dear?
I think so.
I'm not really importantly knowledgeable about various philosophers, although I did have a course in college called Philosophy of Religion. I can't remember a whole ton from that class, but Immanuel Kant is a German guy, correct?
I believe so.
Similarly to what Voltaire wrote. Voltaire is a famous French philosopher, but not a theologian whatsoever, as far as I know. And then in 1799, Joseph Priestley, if I recall correctly, and I'm more than willing to be discussed with me, Joseph Priestley is the guy from the British Empire who, I was going to say, he invented oxygen. He discovered and described what oxygen was. So he's a scientist. And so in his text, a comparison of institutions of Moses with those of Hindus and other ancient nations, he's the one that evidently reproposed the possible derivation of Abraham from Brahma. Yeah, Joseph Priestley should have stuck with the chemistry, should have done more work on that and less work on comparing and contrasting Hebrew religions with
Hindu ones.
well, I was try to think of the language that the Upanishads are written in. The Upanishads, which are what part of the holy books of Hinduism. Yeah, I think possibly when you live in an area, especially Europe, during these years, you don't have a real feel for how large the world is and how far the land mass is where they believed in Brahma and the other pantheon of the Hindu gods, how far it is away, not just in geographic miles, which it is in geographic miles, but also in cultural miles. There's a real distance, and how far away the language roots of your area are from the language roots of the Indian subcontinent, which is where Hinduism arose. It's almost like you're comparing and contrasting things on the earth with things on the moon. And because you can see the moon, you assume the moon is very, very close. And you are unfamiliar with different languages and worldviews in the world because you're stuck to your own geographic sphere, and you don't get a lot of information from other areas of the world. And so you are comparing and contrasting things that really are far apart and not contrastable. And then you're using the linguistic idea that if two words sound like each other, therefore they come from the same root, which is not true. Because phonology comes and goes, but the roots of your language are different. Human language is human in that God gave human beings language, and language was given only to human beings. I'm deeply sorry if you think that bees have a discussion with each other. I'm not saying that animals do not communicate. They do, and animals communicate in different ways, but it's not the same as an oral language that can be written and can be passed on. Evidently through our DNA is what Noam Chomsky says. Language is a gift to human beings that's unique and makes human beings unique. And even though you know about the gorilla named Coco, one's named Coco, another's named Washo, and they use sign language with their trainer, please realize that if you got to see this gorilla and you started using sign language for them, they would not respond to you, and they do not know you, and they cannot interact with you. They only do this with their one person. So they don't really have language, do they? Because they can only talk to their trainer. And you know what? There are dogs that understand English. And because when you say English to them, they do what you said. And John's dogs and his family, when you speak Hungarian to them, they understood that too. And I did not understand the Hungarian, but those dogs understood Hungarian. It was really weird. And you would never know by looking at them. They look just like a dog you might have. So, there's those secret things about language. And what I'm facetiously saying is animals do have communication. Animals do perceive what we are saying, but it's not because they have language. Because number one, they do not speak it if no one is talking to them. Number two, they do not pass it to their babies. It has to be learned in adulthood. And there's several other categories of why human language is unique from animal language. Or I should say animal communication. Let's put it that way. Have I gone too long into that?
No, and I thank you for doing that for this reason. Mm-hmm. Because in last night's Drosh, I referenced that for about a paragraph.
You did. You referenced what part? Which part?
The part that language is
unique for humans.
Unique for humans. And I mentioned the bees and the chimps, and I forget. Oh, and dolphins.
Yeah. So my professor in my undergrad, Dr. Houston, her job for about 5 years was to examine whether or not dolphins had a language. So this was her field of expertise, and she assures us, I hope she's still with us, she was great. She assures us that no, they communicated with each other. Was it language? No, because language is defined as you're born with it. No one taught it to you. You did not get grammar lessons at age 6 months from your mother. If you didn't, then I don't know. You give up speaking because you can't do it. And that it's passed along without being urged to, that you pick it up naturally without the formal instruction of the grammar classes. And you will pick up not just one language as a baby, you will pick up as many languages as people interact with in your home. So sitting kids in front of Spanish programming will not really do it for their Spanish knowledge. They may pick up a few words. That doesn't mean they speak Spanish. Anyway, it's complicated and we could spend months on it, but let's not do that. But I mean, this is a very nice picture with this paragraph that we have here. Very pretty. I'll show you. Very nice. Look, it's pretty colors. Look, it's nice. They stole it from somewhere and they put it in with Immanuel Kant and
Postel.
Joseph Priestley.
Okay, now, not quite done. A comparison of the institutions of Moses with those of the Hindus and other ancient nations reminded me of something that was related to answering this question and is very important, and that is, Priestley writes about a comparison. What would be far more accurate would be the contrast between these two particular religious systems. And if you were going to do comparisons, historically, you'd be more likely to do it with comparisons in the ancient Near East, where the Jewish people and Israel and Judaism were geographically centered, not with something that they did not come in contact with, and then somehow through the airwaves floated in.
Well, they were so close to each other. Yeah. Human beings were just not that far away from each other.
So anyhow, what you will find is even when you compare Judaism, ancient Judaism, with the religious systems of the days in which Judaism emerged, the days of Abraham and the days of Moses and David and so forth, what you find is not so much comparisons, you find contrasts. And if you want to pursue that a little further, there are two books, one of which is out of print, but that deal with it. One is G.E. Wright, and Wright is spelled with a W, W-R-I-G-H-T. And his book is The Bible Against Its Environment. In other words, it's contrasted with it's presented against the backdrop of its environment, but it's contrasted to its environment. And what Wright does is he painstakingly shows the striking differences between the biblical Jewish system of religion with what was around it in that time period. Okay, there's another book which is in print by John Walton, and this has nothing to do with what was that TV program with the Waltons.
Oh, please. That's so ancient history.
I did get a cackle from back in the room. And that book is Ancient Israelite Literature in its Cultural Context. Ancient Israelite Literature in its Cultural Context, again, compares the biblical stuff, the biblical material and the biblical faith with the faith of those around, with the faith of the others who were living in the time period when Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and descendants lived. And again, it contrasts ancient Israelite religion with the other religions of that day. Both these books show how unique the biblical Jewish religion is, and not how much like the religions around it is. Because so often, regularly, you find people saying, "Oh, look, this particular thing that you find in the Torah sure sounds like what you read in some of the Assyrian literature." Well, if you do a comparison, you'll find, no, it's not like that at all.
And that's actually closer. Babylonian would be closer than Indian subcontinent.
Oh, yes. So those are two excellent books to go into great detail to show you the contrast, the uniqueness of Judaism and the biblical religion. I will mention in that particular context. One of the things I do in at least a couple of the courses, and no, I'm not going to be doing it in the course that I'm teaching now, so this is not a commercial for that course, but I will, in a sense, stand on its head the comparison that's often made between the so-called Mosaic codes and Hammurabi and his legal codes. Because usually, too frequently, the Mosaic material is presented to say it's like the Hammurabi law codes. I actually do hand out a chart in a couple of the courses where we show the contrast between the law codes, which follow the system very much like the system of Hammurabi, as opposed to the Mosaic covenant, which presents a strikingly different system and framework. The two are not compared, they are in fact contrasted. Jessica.
And if I remember correctly, there's a big difference because depending on what social caste you are, whether you were a noble, peasant, or slave, the penalties were different for your crimes, while in the Torah, the penalties were the same no matter what station you are. Actually, the stations aren't even mentioned. It doesn't say, oh, if you're a noble, then this is what happens. If you're a slave, this is what happens. This says, no, this is what happens when you do this.
Excellent observation, and let me build on that with a phrase that you often find. This will be the same law to you and the aliens or strangers who are living among you. So it's not just to all the people, but to those who have now geographically become connected with this community. So thank you for that excellent observation, Jessica. And yes, the very stress in the one case is, you, depending on what your class is, you have to observe different things.
Yeah.
As opposed to the stress here is, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, you've got to observe the same things.
Same things.
Yeah. In other words, nobody in Judaism, going all the way back to Moses and even to Abraham, no one is above the law.
I was going to say, just even the worldview of the
Yeah.
two areas of the world, within the Abrahamic sphere, there is one God. I mean, if there was a creed, there is no creed in Judaism. There is no thing that you sign your name on the dotted line. The closest thing to a creed is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is God alone, and there's one of him, one. Whereas in Hinduism, there's thousands of gods, and they would say the more the merrier. Mm-hmm. Let's have 1,000 gods. Let's they don't even count them all. You can't even get to the idea. So these two worldviews are so different that, within 10 minutes of understanding anything about Hinduism, Western people can say, oh yeah, this is not like is not like Western religion. I think Barbara's holding up her hand.
Well, before we get to Barbara,
hang on.
Yeah, I will. Building on that, I will say it seems to me so strikingly unusual to contrast what was Priestley's book, Comparison of the Institutions of Moses and Those of the Hindus and Other Ancient Nations. As Patrice just pointed out, with the Hindus, you got thousands of gods. With the other nations, you had multiple gods. One of the striking things that makes Judaism unique is there is only one God. And the Lord our God is the Lord alone, the only one. So why you would even think that the one gets derived from the other doesn't make much sense at all.
Because everybody who wants world peace wants people to be more alike than different all the time. And therefore, they just want everybody to get along. And so, world peace. Oh, our gods are just the same.
Yeah.
Your gods are my gods, and my gods are your gods, because we all want to have one happy family here.
Instead of understanding the broader concept of peace, or if shalom, as I mentioned it briefly last night, is to have compassion and affection for people who are like you, but even those who are different from you.
And especially don't kill people whose religion is different from you.
Yeah.
That would be important also.
Okay, before we close, Barb, did you have a question?
I just had a comment in that
okay.
the God of Abraham is the God of life. Choose life. And immediately when I think of India, I think of the widows being thrown on the funeral pyres. And then in Judaism, there's the levirate marriage where the woman is taken care of. They're just not even close to the same thing. Our God is a God of life.
Very well observed
Yeah.
on both parts of what you said.
Another part of the worldview, which is totally different.
And here's what popped into my mind that relates exactly to that. In the biblical texts, in the book of Genesis, you are not trying to answer, and the texts are quite clearly indicate this. You're not trying to find how life began, but you're trying to find how death occurred. Not why is there life, but how come there's death? The two are contrasted.
Mm-hmm. That was profound.
Well, thank you. And if that was profound, then we will profoundly close.
Yeah. Are we done? There is no horse too dead to beat.
Yes.
We've beaten that horse.
Yeah.
Even though it's a dead horse. Okay. Shall we pray? Is that what you're
Yes,
looking? You're
exactly.
giving me your
I'm
raised eyebrows, which means attention, attention, announcement is coming. Usually means I'm in trouble. Let's pray. Avinu Malchenu, our Father and our King, you are a great God, and it is a privilege to worship you. We thank you and praise you that we could meet together, that we can discuss things that we do not normally get to discuss. We can think about things and try to understand how you're leading us and how you want us to guide us into the future, because no matter who we are, we know we are stepping forward into the unknown every day. So we pray that you accompany us, that you would keep your hand on our shoulders, and that you would also see to our friends and loved ones and family and bring them along too. Thank you for how good you are to us. B'Shem Yeshua Meshachenu, in the name of Yeshua, our Messiah. Amen.
Amen. And as far as I can tell, and I didn't look, give me just a second, because I do see the calendar on the wall. Let me double check that we are having
I have a
Stump.
calendar.
I meant
What
the
it
official-
says?
Yeah.
Okay.
As to if we have Stump.
Do you want me to do the Jeopardy?
Yes. According to the official calendar.
Who's got the answer?
According to the official calendar, we do have Stump the Stars Jewish Style in 2 weeks, which will be the last one before the holidays. So unless you hear otherwise, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
And then we take a big, long hafsacha.
Okay.
Because they're having network problems
Yes.
still.
What you saw me sort of squinting at was the note on our
Pop-up.
monitor, the pop-up on our monitor, their network connection. So we apologize for if you had bad network connections. We just appreciate having you here. Okay.